This is going to be a commentary slash preview of the Lions' visit to Kansas City in week 2 of the preseason with some of my thoughts about the issues the Lions are dealing with in terms of injuries and roster configuration. Lions go to face the Chiefs in a very different place than the really underrated team that showed up in week 1 of 2023 and walked out of there with a 20-19 win. At that time, some people looked past them as legitimate contenders. I did not. If you've been paying attention to my channel for long enough, you would know. They're no longer a secret at this point. In fact, they're going to be the favorite in most situations. They're a team, I think, that just at this point, with the injuries they're dealing with, would like to get to the 2024 regular season, battling a number of injuries. It'll be interesting to see what Dan Campbell and the coaching staff do. There did seem to be, last week, more NFL teams that played their starters, at least a few possessions in week 1 of the preseason, but with all of the injuries that the Lions are dealing with, I can't imagine that would really be a viable option at this point with some of their high level or high quality or high price talent. But I guess we'll see. The one situation this week that bothered me, and I'll digress here for a moment, I have to admit, is briefly cutting Antoine Green. I know they brought him back after he cleared waivers. He was also a 7th round pick, so no, it's not like other teams didn't have multiple choices to select him over a year ago. At this point, it seemed to be he was in competition, the 4th or 5th or 6th wide receiver on the roster. It is difficult for me, and it's a point that I will never be able to get past, to hear the NFL and the media talk about player safety, especially concussions, when we can watch a player get cut a few days after suffering one. I'm not necessarily sure that I blame Dan Campbell and the Lions organization. That's not the point here. And you didn't sign up for this, so my apologies. But I can't help but wonder how many times stuff like that has happened. A player gets hurt in a preseason game, and what's the coverage like, the medical coverage I'm saying? Is it all on you if no one else picks you up in waivers and the team that cut you, in this case the Lions, doesn't bring you back for IR? Thankfully, it sounds like the system is set up in place that he automatically returns to that team. I don't know. He did suffer the injury apparently during the game. So the NFL, I would assume, would have to have some type of coverage set up for someone like that. It sucks. I understand it's a reality of modern football and what I believe to be a limited roster configuration that the NFLPA agreed on with the NFL. Anyway, we will show some film here. Won't necessarily, to be honest with you, be a film study video. This is my comments and my thoughts about the preseason and where they are. So other guys are trying to work their way back to full health. Hendon Hooker apparently may be given a chance to go after suffering a concussion. Only played 2 series last week. Terrion Arnold, Brian Branch, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. also dealing with injuries. I think Branch and Arnold were working on the side field during practice today as I record this, Wednesday that is. Carlton Davis III battling a hamstring injury also. I hope after this next preseason game to have a video out. My intention was to have a video out about the Lions wide receivers. Not the first 3, St. Brown, Williams, and Raymond. I mean the guys that are battling with each other in competition to make the roster and hopefully be active. DPJ, Green, presumably, Tom Kennedy, Isaiah Williams, one of my favorites, Fountain, and Caden Davis. Hoping to focus on them just for a video after this Chiefs game early in the week because I think they have some interesting options, number 1. And number 2, I think some of those guys can play. So when they signed Jake Fromm this week, who hadn't played in the NFL, I think, since 2001, to me that was like a clear indication that Hooker will not play. And then Campbell came out, indicated that there's a chance and some signs pointing that he will. I know for you as a Lions fan, for me, definitely, it was disappointing at that moment. I guess it was Sunday, Monday, to realize Hooker may not play this week. I had fun watching his film. I thought he showed some positive qualities more than just physical attributes. I think he's the clear-cut backup in terms of talent and arm strength. But you got to be available. You got to be able to play physically. So I understand that is an issue that people will judge him on. But the ball just looks different coming out of his hand compared to Nate Sudfeld. I feel like decisions are made quicker. Like he's a faster, better athlete who can break tackles. Obviously, we saw that. So to me, it's really not a competition for that. It's just whether Hooker is healthy and available. Fromm apparently wasn't in the league last year, if I saw it correct. How much will he play against the Chiefs? How much do you want him to play? Probably none. I can't imagine that you would really get a good look against. I mean, that's a high-level defense in Kansas City. Steve Spagnuolo knows what he's doing. I saw some articles earlier in the week talking about Hooker, not playing, and then they signed Fromm. So, like I said, it was a little bit disappointing. At this point, if we do get to see Hooker play, I guess for all of us, it'll be like a guilty pleasure because I do wonder about him playing 8 or 9 days after suffering a concussion in what is really a meaningless preseason game. Again, talking about player safety, that's difficult for me to reconcile. I think he practiced this morning, Wednesday, which was a light day. So maybe the Lions just signed Fromm early in the week as insurance in case Hooker can't go or in case Hooker's not really shouldn't go. I feel like it's not worth the risk in my experience for Hooker. Someone who suffered a concussion. In my experience as a high school coach and youth, when concussion was even mentioned, it was minimum 2 to 3 weeks. And when it was confirmed, 4 to 6 weeks. We had guys out for, the rest of the season for us. So it's tough for me to comprehend, not just in this situation, but others, when the NFL and media mouthpieces pretty much talk about player safety in the same sentence as concussions, and then players are brought back, in some cases 4 or 5 days later. I am glad to hear, however, that Dan Campbell has said he'll rest the offensive starters. No reason to put some of those guys at risk, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs nursing a hamstring injury at this point. I fell victim to, I saw a fake news report linked in my Ravens Discord announcing that Gibbs might have had an ACL tear, and I was glad when people in the Lions Discord told me that was a fake account. I will say this, one of the guys I'm looking forward to seeing play, or two of the guys, the two running backs, Zonovan Knight. I liked his game. I liked his game in 2022 when he played with the Jets. If you recall, he had 400 total yards, offensive yards that is, with the Jets. He actually played and got the ball often in the 2022 game late in the season when the Lions go to New York and win 20-17. Remember the fourth down, incredibly well-designed fourth down touchdown pass from Goff to Brock Wright. I always thought Zonovan Knight looked quick, but he didn't get much chance to show it last week, right? He only had 6 carries for 12 yards and I think 1 reception. Sione Vaki looked more impressive. He did play later on in the game. So for me, it'll be noteworthy to see not just which guy gets in the game because they both will play, but in what order. Does Vaki go early and then Knight? I would like to see him rotate on a personal level. I also would like to see Jake Funk play more in the preseason. Not that I think he can be an NFL starter, certainly not for the Lions, but I know a little bit about him. He's a Maryland guy. He graduated in 2015 in Maryland. I had just stopped coaching, so I saw film of him and heard of him. He was a badass running back at Damascus High, which is like a football powerhouse just northwest of Washington, D.C. So Campbell also said, and another thing he said, I think Monday and then Wednesday, was that some defensive starters will see time against the Chiefs. I can't imagine it'll be too many, number one, but number two, it does sound appealing if Mahomes and some of the Chiefs' offensive guys play again, and we get to see 2 or 3 possessions of competition, almost a pseudo rematch from Detroit's road win about 11 months ago. Mahomes and those guys, I don't know if you know, Kelsey, Pacheco, even Rashee Rice, and others played, I think, 2 possessions in the game last week against the Jags. Arnold and Davis III clearly out at corner. You'd have to think that if Ennis Rakestraw Jr. were not injured on, I think, Monday, leaving practice early, that he would get more reps. Well, let's say all 3 of those guys are out. Aaron Glenn played a lot of cover 2 last week, and you may see more of it if multiple guys are out that would be capable of playing man coverage. Rakestraw got 37 snaps last week. Obviously, Arnold got even less than that. Chiefs have a lot of depth at wide receiver up and down the roster, even though Marquise Brown is going to be out for a while. He's a former Ravens wide receiver. I know that I'll be entertained during the game. I'm not selfishly asking for Rakestraw to play. I do wish I could watch him play. If we have to, we get to focus on Stephen Gilmore. That'd be great. I didn't really pay attention to him last week because so much of my time was looking at Rakestraw, Junior Arnold, and Amik Robertson in coverage. So Gilmore's a guy that I thought played extremely well in the 2023 preseason. That should be obvious to anyone. And I'd like to focus on him after the game and see how he plays. Even some of the other guys that are on the Chiefs roster, like Justin Ross. Another situation to pay attention to this week is the whole James Houston IV position move or non-movement, whether he's going to play Sam or not. It certainly got complicated when Nate Lynn got hurt. He plays on the other side, I think, from opposite Houston, who's the more established guy when you talk about who he was on the field last week. Houston, Lynn, Isaac Ukwu, and Matthew Betts. Maybe Houston gets put into more of a rush role this week, trying to glean into what Dan Campbell has said for a moment. I wonder, one possibility I would project or predict is that Barnes and Houston Forth are on the field together early in this game, meaning Barnes is at Sam for 15 snaps or so, and team him up with Houston Forth to presumably free up Houston for those rush situations opposite the Sam, whether it's the will or rush, whatever people call it. And I do think the Sam and will or Sam and rush are interchangeable in pretty much every defense, especially against 11 personnel, but I understand it's a real dynamic in it, so I don't mean to downplay it necessarily. If we get 2 to 3 possessions of some mix of the Chiefs starters against high-quality second stringers for Detroit on defense, that sounds fun. I do plan on watching 3 games Saturday, so that particular element for this game would be a nice little mix-up in the middle of a nice little wake-up call, I guess, in the middle of watching 3 games in a row, the Ravens, Lions, and then the Seahawks. Personally, on the injury front, for the defensive starters that have been mentioned by me or Campbell alluding to it, I'm not sure it's worth it. When injuries bunch together like this, it becomes overwhelming as a coach and player, and of course as a fan, to constantly hear those updates. It's like what's going to happen next. I will tell you as an aside, I've been there as a coach twice in training camp and once during the season. One year we had what we would consider Camp Cupcake. There was significantly less contact, and lo and behold, the first 2 times we were exposed to real game situations, we had a shit ton of injuries in the ensuing 2 or 3 days afterwards. It was almost like the body wasn't acclimated to it. We went into one game with 5 defensive starters out. It's very difficult to do when you're at a small school and you have two-way players competing. NFL fans know the feeling. If you don't know, the 49ers had to cancel some joint practices, I think a week and a half ago, because like 22 players were out with injury. If I read it correctly, that is. Additional to that, another point for the joint practices and who plays in the preseason, I believe the article is Detroit Free Press. I could be wrong. I find myself reading their stuff more often. I think it was Andy Reid said that he does not like joint practices, and apparently he's turned down offers to do so recently, one of which I guess was from Dan Campbell and the Lions, in favor, this is Andy Reid, in favor of playing his starters some during the preseason. I don't know what your thoughts are on it, playing starters as opposed to joint practices. Either way, you're trying to get a look at the high level, at playing against and competing with some high level talent that's on the other side, not just your team. Personally, I don't know if the Lions have anything to prove in this trip to Kansas City. For the rest of the football country or nation, last year I guess they did. I never thought they needed to prove anything. I thought that the talent was quite obvious. The winning culture was established from mid to late season 2022, and 2023 was just a continuation of that. Significant talent upgrades at this point, I think, have opened a lot of people's eyes a year later. They should have been opened week 1 of 2023. Nonetheless, we've got what should be a fun day of football for me. Hopefully it is for you. And the Chiefs-Lions right in the middle of it. I'm looking forward to it, especially to see what they do with James Houston IV and some of the DBs that I mentioned in the little preview video here. I hope to have a video out on the wide receivers after the Chiefs game, and perhaps one more film study video to put out on Saturday morning previewing this game. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other Lions fans would enjoy what really was just a commentary video about the Lions going to Kansas City almost exactly 1 year later, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media so other Lions fans can enjoy it as well.